I know that obviously the first series has been out, and you would have talked about this when the show first came out. But Stephen, I think for the purpose of people here who don't sort of necessarily know the sort of history of the show, your parents did used to work for Bristol Community Service, didn't they?
They did, yes. Yes, my mother was involved with community service when I was growing up, and she very proudly tells everyone that Diane is based on her, which...
I'm not sure how much we'll be saying that after this episode.
I know. She has not had super gonorrhea, as far as we're aware, front or back. But she does proudly say, yeah, that's based on me, that. But it's not based on her, really, except the fact that she did a similar job, yes.
Have you met Stephen's mum?
Yeah, we've got a scene in episode 4 that your mum and dad are both in
that's
the
right.
background
Yes,
of.
they like to demand a cameo every series I do. They do, yeah.
That's fair enough. And I mean, just in terms of Jess, the role that you play, is that something you had to do some research for? I mean, in talking about, I'm jokingly about channeling Stephen's mum, but did you have to kind of do any research or talk to people about that kind of role? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I did a tiny bit of research, but I think Diane takes it to the next level. So the majority of it, we came up together with John and Stephen, and her makeshift tool belt and things that you'll see later in the series as she's training to be a PCSO. I think it is kind of what community support people do, but and then with the extra bit of Diane on top of that, I think. Yeah.
So we had. It's a very unusual story. The story of the making of season 1 and season 2, in the sense that normally what would happen is a season comes out, you get some sort of audience feedback, and it's out and about, and then season 2 is kind of sometimes might be written already and then filmed. But this case, you ended up through the circumstances of the pandemic filming them back to back. I just wonder, to start off with, Stephen, from your point of view, how that ended sort of working out.
Well, it turns out that shooting 2 series of a show under a pandemic is a fucking nightmare. Yeah. And I would suggest no one ever does it, particularly if one of your key cast members is 78-year-old Oscar winner Christopher Walken. Because every day you're on a knife edge hoping he doesn't get COVID. And if anyone even looks like they're going to sneeze near him, you sort of jump in front of him like you're taking a bullet for the president. And so, yeah, you're just always on a knife edge thinking one of your key cast might die. It's like being in a real life Squid Game. So that, amongst other things, made it very arduous. But in a way, I'm glad that we did it that way around, because it allowed us to sort of plant seeds in the shooting of series 1 that we could pay off in series 2, and adjust things. It's quite rare to get that opportunity. So, there's a lot of strands and themes from the first series, some of which are sort of answered here, but others which come to fruition as the series goes on.
And as I understand it, you started filming season 1 as you had always planned to do. The pandemic hit, and there was then quite a long kind of hiatus break. And during that period, you then wrote season 2.
Yes.
And sort of ended up filming season 1 and season 2, kind of the rest of season 1 and then season 2 together.
Yes, that's right. I think we did something like, 220 days or something in the end, was it, of shooting? Which is pretty mad, for any...
12 hours of TV.
That's 12 hours of TV, which is a lot to do. But, yes, but, and it was arduous. But, in a way, I was sort of pleased that, that we've sort of done that now. And like you say, we can kind of bring the next series out quite swiftly after the first one and sort of capitalise on the interest in the show and the momentum. So I wouldn't recommend it, but it's turned out well.
Happen, doesn't it? Sometimes the show comes in 2 years, you have to wait for the next one, and actually with this one, you were able to literally 6 months later deliver the new series.
That's right. Yeah.
How did it work in practice, though, in terms of between your role and John's role? I know that you didn't direct in the second series, or I don't think you directed in the second series, but obviously you were still presumably editing the first series and doing some shoots of the first series while the second series was happening. How in practice did that work? I mean, it feels a little sort of schizophrenic in terms of the way of working. Especially as you're on screen a lot of the time as well.
Well, I'll let John answer that, because I'm sure he can speak more frankly.
Yeah, it was really interesting, because you're shooting so much story, and frequently you're shooting a scene from season 2 for somebody else's episode, and then a scene for season 1 for your episode, and jumping back and forth between time periods. And I'll be honest, I haven't said this before, but quite frequently I was standing on set shooting something going, I don't know whose money that is. I do not know who owes who what. I don't know who she is. I don't know who that guy is. I don't know why we're here. It's very complex. And there's a third director, Alicia MacDonald, in the audience, who also manned the ship extraordinarily well. But to Stephen's great credit, he has a great ability to hold all that complexity of story in addition to all the other hats he wore really well. And you kind of need at least one person on set who kind of knows everything and who can answer those questions. But it was tough but really enjoyable.
And how did that work out from the actor's point of view, bearing in mind? I mean, I know that you're used to filming scenes out of sequence, but when you've got 12 hours of material to film not in a sequential way at all, and your characters are in different positions of in terms of their journey, because there's massive journeys they go on throughout the first and second series. I mean, how did you kind of deal with that kind of mentally in terms of preparing yourself and being ready for those? I mean, I guess that's what actors do, but I mean, did it feel more? Did it feel weird at this time, and also with being in that kind of the whole bubble of COVID and so forth?
I think we knew the whole story, but then when you get on set, you just turn to somebody like Stephen and look at them, hopefully, and then they tell you what you just did. Oh, you've just come from that scene where you were doing that, and don't forget that you've just done that. So yeah, we hold the lines, but you can't necessarily hold everything, can you? I can't anyway. So yeah, there's always someone to tell you, which is great.
Anybody else want to jump in on that while we're...
I'm just going to hark back to what you said about the two series in one. It was such a lovely call to get, because I think we'd shot about 3 scenes, maybe a week or so in March of 2020 when it all got shut down. And then we all had this sort of very long period, and can't speak for anyone else, but you're sort of desperate to get back and hoping that you get the call, because although it was hopeful and likely, it wasn't a guarantee that we were going to be rebooted. There were lots of productions going down that weren't able to come back. And so to get that phone call at the end of the year to say that we were indeed coming back to shoot, but we were actually going to be coming back to twice the project that we'd started. It was one of the best calls I've ever had. It was such a great thing. And
so many people at that point, you say, weren't working actually, and weren't able to work.
Exactly, especially at that time. Yeah.
It was probably the only time in England where every single actor was in the same position. Because usually you've got actor friends, you're like, oh, they had an audition, or oh, they're up for that, or someone's doing that. Nobody was auditioning, nobody was working, no one was waiting for a call from anyone. So it was a great leveler, the pandemic.
No, I know that when you work on a sort of a show or a film, often people will talk about the great camaraderie with the cast and everybody got on really well, and that's you always expect people to say that, but it does feel like a particularly kind of special experience. It's a very ensemble cast, and it really does feel like there's a connection between you all. I don't know whether it's because of the fact that you kind of all went through that experience with lockdown and so forth, but would you say that was correct?
I've never met these people before. No, I had a really lovely time working on it. I think we all got such a strong bond afterwards. I mean, you spend, a year shooting almost? Yeah, I've not seen them since, and it's been really lovely. It's been great.
But there is a slight sort of, not wishing to trivialise it, but there is a slight feeling of sort of PTSD having been through it, that you have been in a sort of, in the trenches together, and you've been through something. No one understands what it was like in Nam, except us. But yeah, and also I think one of the things that is difficult in generating that camaraderie, which you do want in order for it to infect the screen, as you say, is it's very hard when you're all wearing masks. You forget how much just the sort of casual language of smiling, after a good take or something, and when you're wearing masks, particularly as directors, you have to sort of, you're like a kids' TV presenter, trying to give encouragement, and it does make it much harder to sort of break down those barriers.
I think as well, though, with COVID, we weren't able to see our own family. I mean, your parents live in Bristol, don't they? And
never saw them.
Never saw them.
No.
And similarly with my family, never saw them. So we literally only had each other. So it was quite an extraordinary...
Little acting troupe.
Yeah.
We all lived in a big house together, like the monkeys.
Yeah, it's great.
And obviously, Rianne can't be here today because I think she's in Thailand at the moment.
Yeah.
And we haven't got Christopher Walken here either. But apart from that, obviously, the gang is all back. But can you just tell us a little bit about the casting of Christopher Walken and how he fitted in the Bristol scene?
Yeah, he wrote me a letter. Dear Steve, I'd love to do anything that you've got coming up.
They all do that.
Yeah, like a pile of letters. It's embarrassing. We just, the character was always supposed to be sort of American, and we wanted that feeling of someone that was sort of slightly exotic, like an alien that had sort of been dropped into this world, and yet very quickly revealed himself to be just as sort of small and petty and as any of the other characters. And yes, so I went out to see him in Connecticut, where I've told this story many times, but he made me an omelette, no big deal. And and we sat there, and he would ask a question. He's very thoughtful man, very quiet, quite sort of meditative. So he would ask a question, and I'd answer, and he just kind of, and then he'd ask another question, and I'd answer, and it was like having a Zoom conversation in person. You never knew, you're never entirely sure if he was thinking or buffering. But he seemed to like me, and we got on well. And next thing we knew, he was in Bristol. Which is kind of insane, really. But But yeah, he came
He's
and did
a
it.
fax corresponder, isn't he? He's not in the modern world yet. Or maybe he is actually.
He has a landline phone and he has a fax, yes, but there's no cell phones or iPads or things like that. So whether he's seen the show, I don't know.
But I did hear that, Gamba, you had introduced him to the delights of the mobile phone. You taught him about finding information. Is that right? Have I got that right?
Did I?
I'd heard it. Maybe it wasn't. I'd heard that he was very impressed when one of you was able to get some information from your phone about an actor he was interested in, and he was like, and he just. Am I making something completely up?
You might not be, but I don't think it was me.
I'm even better prepared for this than I thought. I wonder. I mean, as you're here as well, one of the memorable moments from the scene we've just seen, obviously, is when you've got the really horrific moment where you have that bag over your head. I mean, I'm guessing they did that in very short spurts, and it's all good editing in there. But was that an uncomfortable scene to shoot?
Not short enough.
Yeah. Is that right? Well, I'm laughing. Maybe it was, you're being serious when you're saying that.
Yeah, that was a difficult scene, I'd imagine,
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I felt safe. You know, we had the stunt coordinator, we had people around. You know, if I felt like I couldn't breathe, I would just rip the bag. So do you know what I mean? We were so cautious about it. We didn't want to make like anything where I was in danger. Do you know what I'm saying? So I felt cool. I was alright. They poked little holes in the bag. You know, the stunt coordinator said that I'd be able to like breathe if I just take short breaths in, as it was over me, but that didn't work. So I just ended up just trying to hold my breath and do whatever I can. So yeah.
And Jessica, I have to say you wore. I mean, the standout outfit today was the red suit that you wore. And I mean, how thrilled were you then when you discovered the attire you were going to be? I mean, because actually, all the way through the series, you definitely win for the best costumes, probably, don't you?
Thanks. Yeah, it was fun. Well, I don't think I've got stiff competition with Lady Gabby.
You do.
But yeah, we tried to channel John Travolta. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. The disco scene was really fun to do, actually. The whole of the time in the club was great. Great fun.
But there's only about 14 people in there.
I know, yeah,
Because
of COVID.
You have to have all these rules that everyone's got to sort of, you only have about 12 people in there, so you're just moving them around. So I'm sure if you stopped it, it's just the same faces in different positions.
And no music, right? There's very
Never any
rarely
music,
ever
so you're
music.
just dancing like a lemon with 14 people looking at you, hoping not to die.
Danced enough, yeah.
Well, it's an amazing thing now how quickly things have moved on, isn't it? When you think about literally that was only in the last 2 years and how quickly we moved on. But I noticed in terms of in the credits and stuff, so you see about intimacy coordinators, you see COVID security people. I mean, time has moved on a lot in recently for the better, I'm sure. But I wonder if you could, just talk about in terms, because obviously it's a big cast. How does that work in a COVID world? Having such a big sort of crew behind, it's not just the people on stage; it's all the people making it as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult. Like to Stephen's point about creating a company feel, which most certainly this show did, it's much harder when you can't when people have to wear masks. I think everybody did a great job with that. I remember, for example, the first time I met Christopher was on set the day that I was filming with him first, and he was wearing a mask, and I remember going over to him and saying hello and asking him how he liked to be addressed, and because is it Chris or Christopher, and I know his birth name is Ronnie, and so I just wanted to get that right. And I asked him, and he just kind of looked at me with those pale blue eyes, and then I heard him say, "Captain Moonlight." And I was just like, okay, it's Captain Moonlight.
But you'd probably, if it wasn't a mask, you'd see a sort of glimmer of a smirk, right?
That's
but without
exactly
it,
all
you're
you can
just
see is the cold blue eyes, and you're like, I'm calling him Captain Moonlight.
Claire, your character is so interesting, and what's particularly interesting, I guess, in terms of looking at the situation now, is I guess when the script was written, some of the stuff that was going on in Bristol around the statues and the right moments, I guess, hadn't happened at that point. So in a way, you were kind of the scripts were kind of prophetic in that respect. Can you just tell us anything about that, or any kind of research you had to do in terms of the role?
Well, the funny thing is that when we first read it, there was a scene where we're all sitting down and we're all having our lunch, and I think Myrna's arguing with John, and she starts talking about the statue of Colston and how the statue needs to come down, and then of course we had a break, hiatus for COVID, and by the time we came back, the statue was down. So it was, it kind of was prophetic. But in terms of research, I don't know. I think there's a small bit of me that's a bit like Myrna. You know, when I was at drama college, went on every single march. I was at drama college during the miners' strike and all of that. So the poll tax, like people my age, I think we were much more political in terms of being activists, in terms of getting up and being out there. But I think she's a great character to see on stage. I always say the only character I've ever seen like her is anyone who's old enough to remember Citizen Smith with Robert Lindsay and, Wolfie. No. Yeah, so, but I don't think there's been a character that's sort of an openly activist like that. Well, not that I've seen on British TV anyway, and especially not in a kind of comedy way, but then also she's real. And also Bristol is the city for that. Bristol is definitely the city for that. It's a city of activists. It's a city of people who don't take things lying down. So, I love playing her. It's a great opportunity. Yeah, I'm very pleased.
Darren, in terms of the character that you play, and I think it's a character that people don't instinctively sort of drawn to. It's not the most sympathetic character initially, but I wonder, as an actor, how important it is to like the character you're playing and to kind of understand where they're coming from. I mean, you all go on a massive journey from the start, but certainly at the beginning, he's a difficult character to like, I think.
He just needs a cuddle from his dad. That's really where he begins in it. I mean, obviously from the get-go, on the surface, I think he fitted a stereotype, as did the others, and that's very much kind of partly the remit of the show in the beginning. But obviously I had the sort of benefit of reading both series by the time we came back to shoot, so I had that overview, and it was always a sort of in my eye, yes, to answer your question, of course you have to absolutely empathize with and be in love with, to a degree, this person and the human side of them. Everything else is circumstance and conflict and externalized, but the internal sort of aspects, obviously you've got to be you've got to be sort of standing up for that, and it was always, for me it was always a sort of an unrequited love story, a sort of a man who spends his life and his time picking small fights with everyone because at his age he still hasn't sort of resolved the big fight that's inside him, and so those people will constantly just push and prod until they reach a point where they can push and prod no more, and so what was really fun for me in series 2 is the man who sort of shouts and is very front-footed and uses aggression, be it verbally or physically, reaches a ceiling with that in series 2 and sort of resorts to the petulant child version of that same internal dilemma. And so where he was once, trying to be threatening, he now is just sort of childlike and sort of, I think, sort of, hopefully, that sort of likability or that sort of empathy continues because we see him sort of falling away from his own mask.
No, in the same way, how did you prepare for the role of Lady Gabby? Once again,
she did loads of coke.
In terms of going through, once again, a massive journey. But I guess after the scenes with Richard D. Grant playing your dad, and then obviously in this scene where we sort of see you sort of hitting kind of rock bottom again, how do you prepare for a role like that?
That's such a good question. I think, we rehearsed quite a bit of it, quite a few of the group scenes, and I think we worked quite closely in creating this drama that was Gabby and sort of everything that she goes through and everything that happens around her. But just in terms of preparation, it's just a question of reading the scripts over and over again and finding those depths within it. Hello. Just finding those depths within it that so that you realise that she's a very flawed person. She actually needs help. She's actually crying out for attention from people that really care. It was just a question of really looking into the character and the brilliant writing that was already on the page.
Well, I'm trying to think. We were lucky. Were we lucky? I'm trying to think. Had we sort of managed to cut anything together so we started to get a sense of the tone? I don't know. Once we
before the first shutdown,
we sort of we got a little bit together, and obviously, as you mentioned, the DP Nick was a constant factor all the way through. except for the instance when he was in a van with someone who tested positive for COVID, and so because of the protocols, he had to go home for 10 days, although he's completely fine. And he'd phone him up and go, we're struggling here, Nick. He's just having a beer in his garden, just fine, absolutely fine. And we're all shooting it on our phones, you know. Does that look good? And but in terms of the tone, I think, again, I always think you put a great faith in the actors once they sort of start inhabiting the characters. I always think, as an actor, you're seeing the story and the script from the inside out in a way that, as a director or writer, you're seeing it from the outside in. And so I think, actors are very good at sensing when something doesn't feel right for their character or doesn't feel right for the scene, or they think, hang on, wasn't I in love with that person in that scene? Why am I hating them now? And they're quite good they're a very useful resource in that regard, I think, for all of the directors who are sort of coming in and out. What do you feel, John, in terms of keeping that tone? It's a difficult thing to do, isn't it?
It is, but I think the visual language gets established up top, and then there's a kind of an implicit sense that like a certain lens is used in a certain instance, or that you will block a scene a certain way. And I think by kind of 40 days into a shoot, it's almost unspoken, and I presume it's the case among the cast as well, where you just start to feel that how the scene may begin to appear, and everybody contributes to that, so it feels collective rather than one person coming in and going, right, it's my floor today, we're doing it completely differently.
But it's like you said, there would be scenes where you'd be directing one, and then you'd doff your hat, and one of us would come in and take over for the next scene, and it had to be, because of the nature of shooting, very collaborative in that way, and very sort of very
in fact,
loose.
there's more than one individual scene in this episode that was shot twice by two different directors because of cast availability, because of COVID. So you're shooting two sides of the same scene on different days with different directors and cutting it together as one. So it's a kind of show where that stuff happens given the circumstances. So you'd want to have a unity of vision in that case.
The head on the questions about embarrassing scenes, particularly in nightclubs, which I find nightclubs particularly excruciating, particularly for a tall person. But as some people may know, I mean, for instance, I think the lampshade is a minor incident compared with some of my real life experiences. Perhaps, most notoriously, some of you maybe know this. I was at a party thrown by the comedian Sarah Silverman, and someone offered me a chocolate brownie. This was in Los Angeles, and it had, I'm going to be honest with you, marijuana was in it. And I ate a bite of it thinking, I'm 6'7", how it's not going to affect me much. I've probably got the constitution of Willie Nelson. It turns out I've got the constitution of a 3-year-old girl, because I immediately fell inside my own brain, and I was completely screwed, and I did what you should do when you've just taken some marijuana, is go and look at yourself in the mirror. For as long as possible, that really helps. And then eventually I stepped out, I thought I'll get some air, and I walked, and it was a very busy party, and I made my way through everybody, and I suddenly found myself walking through a 8-foot plate glass window that shattered in its entirety around me, and all the shards of glass, and I suddenly found myself looking back into the party, just bits of glass falling, like sort of a Steve Merchant cutout in the glass, like, Elmer Fudd, and not entirely sure how it happened or how I wasn't more injured. And at that moment, you're sort of looking at all these partygoers. You're not, because no one primes you for what to do in that circumstance. You're not. Do you just go ta-da, and then run? And so I said, I think it's time to leave. And I remember kind of waiting in the lobby and waiting for an Uber, and I just heard some new partygoers arriving, and one was going upstairs, and I just heard one of them say, "Hey, did you hear some asshole just walk through a window?" And yeah, I know. And anyway, my point being that if I put that in a show, you'd go, that's mental. That would never happen. And so you have to dial it back to just getting your head in a lampshade, which, no, of course, that's small fry compared with my experiences. So I think because there's a number of those instances in my life, there is a sort of exorcism in putting them on screen. But I was talking to someone the other day about tone and about the fact that sort of the comic and the tragic can sit side by side in real life as much as in TV. And the example I was thinking of was when I went to my grandmother's funeral. Keep it light, Steve. And we were in the hearse on the way to the sort of graveyard. And I was in the back with my family in the coffin. And and there was a driver and the priest or whatever, the reverend, the vicar who was going to take the event. And I could hear them talking through the glass. And the driver said, "Hey, vicar, do you drive?" And the vicar said, "Nah, I had to choose between drinking and driving. I chose drinking. And they sort of were chuckling away. And I'm sat there listening to this through the glass thinking, my dead granny's back here. But I think for them it's just another day at the office, isn't it? You know, and so I think that, to me, that's a great example of how sort of the sadness and the absurd can kind of sit side by side. And why not in a TV show as well? Well, the show to me is actually about the things which unite us as much as divide us, you know, and I hope that it's quite an optimistic show, and that, as Darren said, you know, what begin as hopefully as caricatures or stereotypes begin to seem like three-dimensional people the more you watch the show, and that you start to root for people that perhaps you wouldn't like if you met them in real life. You empathize with them because you can see the demons, or you can see what it is that drives people and leads them to the people they are now. And I think that seems to me a very hopeful message, because it's to me about encouraging dialogue and conversation between people. I think when you live in divided times, when it's about Brexit or whatever it is, and it's very easy to see everybody else as an other, as a type. They're pro-Brexit, they're anti, whatever it might be, that you forget that those are people and they've got to that opinion because of their life story, rather than because they're evil or whatever it might be. And so, I don't know, to me the whole show is about trying to take people and sort of show them warts and all, and sort of root for them. And again, it's also a testament to the actors that they can make them likeable. You know, we've got ideas for Series 3, and we've been breaking stories for that, but it's all dependent on the people higher up with money and so on, deciding if we can do it. But there definitely feels like there's a lot more mileage in the characters, which is exciting.
Getting that cast together again is going to be interesting.
Pricey. Oh, you know, difficult. Yes, difficult. Yeah. You know, in terms of,
rate has gone right up.
Yeah, yesterday's price is not today's price.
In terms of a spin-off for Jess, definitely not. Absolutely no. And if she tries to do anything similar without permission, we will come down on her. We will prosecute you to the full extent of the law. Yes. Well, this is going to surprise you. I've not been involved with a lot of drug dealing and knife crime. But I co-created the show with a guy called Elgin James, who is an American writer and producer, director, who's an extremely talented man. He does a show called Mayans MC in America, which is a spin-off from the Sons of Anarchy. And Elgin had a lot more experience, unfortunately, than me in that world, because he grew up in running with gangs, and he went to jail for a time. And so he has a lot more insight into that stuff, and he's been very much a guiding light and a kind of collaborator in terms of that stuff. And just can give a different perspective, you know, and a different take on it. But you know, alongside that, obviously, you know, we all, and there's a whole writing team, do a lot of research, and we speak to, you know, reformed, you know, gangsters, and so you know, it's a combination of the research and, you know, talking to people, and Elgin's background that sort of helped us with that stuff.
But the show, I'm told, this is an exclusive, I'm told, is going to be premiering on June the 5th. So it's very, very soon. I think all 6 episodes are going to be dropping on BBC Player as well, BBC iPlayer. So not long to wait and watch the whole series. And you've got Julia Davis coming up as well.
That's right.
One of my all-time favourite actors. So that's another treat to look forward to then. I just want to say big thank you to all the people who have helped put tonight, but our panel, a big thank you to you for your time this evening. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you so much for having us. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.